Welcome. I'm Larry Olsen, and this is the Brain Vault Podcast. Did you know that the thoughts you're thinking right now are shaping the life you'll live tomorrow? Well, in this podcast, we just don't talk about mindset. We decode the blueprint behind behavior, performance, and possibility. This is where science meets real-world strategy, and your brain stops running on autopilot. If you're ready to turn default thinking into intentional living, you're in the right place. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the Brain Vault Podcast. I have a question for you. What if the biggest threat to your business right now isn't moving too slowly? It's moving boldly in the wrong direction. You know, AI is everywhere. Companies are acquiring, restructuring, scaling, and transforming faster than ever. But here's the real question. How do you know if the move you're making is creating value or just creating expensive complexity? My guest today, Michael Hofer, helps leaders answer the question. Michael is a CFO, transformative executive, author, and advisor who has worked at the highest levels of finance strategy, AI adoption, mergers and acquisitions, and business transformation. He's helped lead more than 30 M&As and restructuring transactions worldwide, giving him a front row seat to what happens when bold strategy works and when it turns into costly noise. What makes Michael compelling is that he doesn't speak in buzzwords. He turns complex ideas into practical frameworks leaders can use to make better decisions, move faster, and produce measurable results. He's also the founder of the Thrive Network, where he connects business performance with human potential and health optimization. A perfect fit for the Brain Vault, where we believe leadership is not just about scaling a company, but strengthening the person making the decisions. Michael, welcome to the Brain Vault.
Great to be here. Thanks a lot for the invitation.
No, we're excited. How about we get started with this question? In a world where every leader is being told to adopt AI, transform, acquire, and scale, how does a CEO know whether they're making a smart strategic move or just chasing the next shiny object?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And by the way, it's also a good question for mergers and acquisitions, because every company is different. And it is very important for the executives really to figure out whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's mergers and acquisitions. What is really the vision of the company? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to land in the end? And I follow here a very simple approach, which is called RPM, results, purpose, and the purpose is the big why. Why do you want to land with the results? And then massive actions. It's an approach that Tony Robbins implemented and communicated already a few years ago. And I think it's very helpful on a personal level, but also on a company level. So what is really the result? Where do you want to land at the end with your company? And then you have different tools that you can use. Artificial intelligence is one of the tools. Mergers and acquisitions is another tool. But you need to be sure how it helps you really to achieve your goals and your vision.
You know, let me ask you this, because this is what I've found working with leaders. Is depending on how long they've been in the business, what kind of massive results are you looking for? And what's your sense of purpose can be really kind of ambiguous. They're really questions that they're really not clear enough on. I mean, they were clear when they started out what we wanted to do in this company. And as they get older, it starts to lose, at least for a lot of leaders, its sense of identity. And now you come along because they're at a point where they need to make a transition. How do you deal with sometimes just as deer staring at the headlights when you ask them, why are you doing this?
Yeah. I mean, You have to work on your strategy and your vision continuously. It's not only once at the beginning yet that you define a vision and then you just go after the vision and it stays the same. It's developing. Life is developing. Our tools are developing. So on a regular basis, the leadership team, ideally, and ideally combined with the owners of the business, sit together on a regular basis and think, okay, the next 3 years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years even, the bigger vision, where do we want to be? And that sometimes can change quite significantly from one year to the next. I'm a big fan of the sentence, there is always opportunity in life. You just need to be very broad what are you thinking about, right? Whenever you try to decide something, don't jump on the first opportunity. Always think, what's the opportunity 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? And when you regularly look at those different opportunities, you need to think about your vision because otherwise you just keep running into all directions.
Mm-hmm. And how do you keep, from the next shiny object, if you will?
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of leaders, they'll get involved, they'll leave the company, they'll go, and not permanently, but they'll go to a seminar or they'll come home with 7 ideas, great ideas. And, a lot of the other leaders in the organization are kind of, time out, which one's going to stick. They get kind of used to it. Um, how do you help them decide which opportunity is going to be best for them?
Yeah. So let me start with an example for artificial intelligence, and then we can talk about mergers and acquisitions, which is very similar in the answer.
Okay.
I have had a few discussions with senior executives in the company where I'm CFO. It's a big company, big energy company. And some people came to me and said, okay, let's use AI for forecasting. And I reframed the question and said that the goal is not to use AI in forecasting. The goal is to have daily availability of data. And the AI is one of the tools to get there, but there are other tools how to get there. I want to have more than 3 scenarios in my forecast, right? Not only the worst case, best case, and the most likely case. I want to have 100 scenarios and a range of outcomes. And Monte Carlo simulations and AI is one of the tools that can provide it. So the tool itself is not the goal. It's something else. And the same with mergers and acquisitions, right? So sometimes what I see very often happening is an investment bank reaches out to an owner with a good proposal, right? And the owner says, yeah, that sounds interesting. It's kind of aligned with my vision. Let's jump on it without really thinking what is really the vision. Are there other tools? And you need to compare organic growth with mergers and acquisitions and not only look at one of the targets, but you need to develop a target pipeline and criteria to evaluate different target companies. So M&A is again just a tool to achieve something else. And where I help many people, executives, owners of companies, but also employees at our company, really think about what is the result? What do we really want to achieve? And the tool is never the result.
So we get clear on that right away.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yes.
sometimes that's a longer discussion, by the way.
Yeah.
So it's not only one meeting, it may be 2, 3, or 4 meetings to really figure that out, what is really the result where we want to end. But
So
it's like people saying, I want to have more money. Money is just a tool to achieve other things, right?
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. I want a degree. Yeah. Well, the degree is just a piece of paper that opens up other opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Um, when you brought up something very interesting, and that is that we look at these as tools and not the massive end result, if you will. And if you take a look at what's happening right now with the concept of AI, it becomes this massive entity in itself as opposed to the tool.
Yeah.
And then the ultimate scare is, exposure, because everybody, a lot of people can have access, and depending on what AI you're using. But how do you deal with the ones that come to AI with kind of a fear attitude.
Yeah, there are many people who fear, by the way, any change, right? So
You
that
bet.
happened with the internet. I started working 40 years ago when we didn't have computers and no cell phones and nothing like that, right? So there are obviously risks, and by the way, I really enjoy artificial intelligence, and I support the use of it, and I use it quite heavily, right? But there are also downsides, and there are different kinds of artificial intelligence. Usually, when we talk about AI, we think about ChatGPT and the large language models like Claude, and they have hallucinations. For example, they really sometimes come back with the wrong answer. Or there is a potential bias in the output because those tools, AI tools, are trained on a certain data, and the certain data may have bias. And then it's just repetition of the bias that you have in the data that was used for the AI. So we need to talk about the big opportunities that we have with automation, right? Speeding up, supercharging ourselves with AI. And that's what I focus on. However, never forget the discussion about those are the downsides. If you use it in the company, you need to have an enterprise license. Otherwise, you cannot be sure that the data goes somewhere. And you need to have an AI a policy. So one of the things we did when we started it, and by the way, I'm the project lead for the implementation of artificial intelligence in our company. And one of the first things we did is we created a generative AI policy where we said, those are the tools we are using in the company. That's where we have the licenses. So we can be sure that that the data is safe. Don't use any other of the other tools. If you want to use other tools because they're developing very fast, you need to have an approval by the director of IT. So it's really talking about the good things, and there are many good things with artificial intelligence, but also the downsides and how we can manage the risk, and it is possible to manage the risk.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. You brought something up that reminded me of a story. One of the people I interviewed not too long ago shared that she was on the way to Vienna, and there was an attractive Italian man sitting across from her, and he said, "Would you like to hear an American joke?" And she said, "Well, sure." And he goes, what do you get when you ask an American a question?" She goes, "Well, I don't know." And he goes, "An answer." And it really got her thinking because she recognized as she hung out more with their culture, there were many more questions that they asked than there were answers that they gave. And when you talked about RPM and the results, purpose, massive action, that surrounds itself with questions. That's what struck me most about you first is they say the greatest quality a leader can have is curiosity. And that just kind of is the offspring of that are questions. And how important do you feel not the right answers are, but the right questions are for the development of an organization to be able to have a successful merger and acquisition, be able to know if that's who I want to acquire or not, rather than just this, yeah, that looks great. Wow, they're able to do this. And I think sometimes we get, such energy and we want so bad that we don't slow down to speed up.
Yeah, I very much agree. The questions is actually the starting point. And I never stop asking the questions, right? So if there is a plan A, you need to think, okay, what is the plan B? What is the plan C? What is the plan D, right? Because if you don't have other plans, you also overpay in mergers and acquisitions. So always have other plans how you can achieve your goals that you want to achieve there.
That's
But
beautiful.
asking the questions is the starting point of everything.
You nailed. There's a bias called the endowment bias, and the endowment bias is that anything you own, you feel has more value than that which you don't.
Yeah.
So, your coffee cup is worth $7, but if you saw another one out there that you didn't own, it's only worth 2 or 3. So it's usually a double element. And I would imagine that one of the challenges you face is plan A. I really like it. We spend a lot of time on it. I mean, we've got days and weeks and months in this one.
Yeah.
How do you come along? You kind of remind me, I don't know if you remember Columbo,
Yes.
that Peter Falk, he just one more question, just one
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
question.
Exactly.
But how do you break them away without creating defensiveness? Because this is where we lose our audience. As soon as we're fighting for our own idea, we're not open to any kind of innovation. And so how do you help them not get out of love, but be open to other possibilities?
Yeah, I never bring it up as a possibility. Actually, I ask the other person, "What do you think could be another approach?"
Okay.
And if the other person comes up with other approaches and other options and other alternatives, then it's a different game. Because I totally agree. If I go into a meeting, I said I know 3 other ways, people will jump on me and say, "Yeah, what do you know about my company?"
Yeah.
But if you just ask the question, what do you think could be other approaches how to achieve that goal? And then that other person or the group or the team of the other people starts thinking about plan B, C, D, E. Then they come up with the different ideas, and it's very helpful. By the way, when we started with artificial intelligence here at the company, it started because I went to MIT for an artificial intelligence course, and one of the things I had to do during the course is to develop an implementation plan of AI in my company, just as an example. And then I went to our CEO and I just asked him, I see that a lot of companies are investing in artificial intelligence. Shouldn't we try to find out and figure out whether it's something for us? So I didn't go into the meeting and said, I have the answers how we can use AI. It was just, shouldn't we try to think about it and try to figure out what it could mean for us?
There's something very magical in what you just shared. And it's an element that we've all put a label on, but we don't really recognize sometimes how to deal with it. And that is the egos that we're dealing with someone who's running an organization or running a family. It really doesn't matter what leadership position they happen to be in. The brain, as I'm sure you're aware of, is wired for predictability, right? And what it does, it wants us to be right over being successful.
Yeah.
And so therefore, the premise that I've got the right idea and yeah, I'll listen, I'm open. You've really found a nice way of allowing them to retain their ego, but still be curious enough to listen to new ideas.
Yeah.
Because you've overcome the defensiveness. And I think if more leaders recognize that, they'd have much more success in their merger and their acquisition or whatever they're attempting to accomplish. And what do you find is one of the greatest challenges you face when you go to work with a company? And what are your greatest moments of this is why I do this?
Yeah. A big challenge is obviously change in general. When you come into a company and you've seen it done in other ways, in other approaches, then obviously going into that meeting and saying, I know it better is not the right approach. So this is one of the challenges. Change management in general. And one of the tools, and we talked about a few examples before, but one of the tools is really just coming up with the questions and actually let the other people answer it. So with the questions, you lead them to the answer that you could propose immediately, but it's just not the right way of teamwork.
So how do you, when you do that, lead them towards the answer you wanted, stay out of the manipulation lane?
Yeah, but it's just by questioning. I mean, I don't know everything better, right? So sometimes they also come up with options I didn't think about before, and it's actually good that we go into a different direction. For me personally, especially being 40 years in finance, for me it's not important to be right. For me, it's important that the team and the company does the right things. So for me, just guiding with questions and leading people sometimes to different options, just just kicking off the idea that there are more than two or three options on the table usually, right? That is just a very helpful tool. And by the way, in mergers and acquisitions, one of the biggest problems, integration is always the biggest challenge in mergers and acquisitions. And one of the challenges is that the acquirer always believes that this company knows it better than the acquired company. And we just roll out our tools, we roll out our processes, everything that we have, and basically destroy the culture of the company that we just bought. And my approach is a different one where I said, let's try to figure out what we do very well. And then let's try to figure out what the acquired company does very well. And then we develop a third culture, which is a new culture. So it's not continuation of one or the other one. It's really a new culture that is being developed together. So it's really trying to find what is the best in the world and how can we put it together.
Yeah, and you break a lot of friction down that way and eliminate a lot of pushback, because that's where so much money is lost, is in the hesitation and the reluctance,
Yeah.
you know, because somebody is slamming the idea down me as gracefully as they possibly can, and left no room for my ideas.
Exactly.
Uh,
By the way,
That's
how I found out about this, because we in one of the companies, it was also a global company. I was CFO for the Americas, but also the financial lead in an M&A transaction. And then for the first year after we bought it, and it was a complex transaction with subsidiaries all around the world. After we bought it, I was for 1 year also the CFO of the acquired company. So I saw it from both sides. What are the advantages and disadvantages? And after that transaction, I really developed that third culture where I said, don't continue with one or the other. See what works best in both of those companies and develop a third culture.
Yeah, outstanding, outstanding. So it's not really a hybrid of the two as much as it's a new unique entity.
It's a new development. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. What are your greatest moments? What really is, as I asked earlier about what has to happen for you to go, this is why I do this, especially after as long as you've been involved in it.
Yeah. I like when it gets complex and when it gets difficult, and when people actually start struggling what is currently happening with the complexity that is sometimes happening in life, and when I can help solving it, guiding it, and not losing optimism. Because I believe also one of the many important things that a leader has to do is we need to look always at the vision, where we want to go, and talk about is how we can go there, and sometimes figure out together with the team how we can go there, but always have that optimism. Hey, the future is bright. We may be in a difficult time right now, but we can go through it. Which brings me back to the RPM, where always focus on the results. Let's keep the focus on the results. Don't get lost in all of the details and the hundreds of to-do lists. Always focus on the big results.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, that's fascinating. You love, rather than run from the challenge, it ignites you.
Yeah,
The more
exactly.
difficult, the more exciting.
Yes.
And then those are probably the greatest ahas for those that are going through that as well, because they haven't been at it as long as you have relative to the number of companies that you've worked with, to be able to see so many different varieties of what works and doesn't work. And then yet still, for you to be open to and excited about, what are the possibilities? What could this possibly turn into? And I think that optimism that you radiate since our first hello is as infectious as well. Let's roll back just a little bit here in your life, and where did you first sense your optimism?
Yeah. It was actually in my personal life with health because I have type 1 diabetes. And since my 11th birthday, and it made me stronger. And I always say, having a problem is not a problem, not solving it is the problem. So learning out of it and it making me stronger. So my superpower is discipline, and I probably learned the discipline from my type 1 diabetes. And it was probably my first biggest challenge in my life with 11 years.
You needed to control it so it didn't control you.
Exactly. That's how I developed in the last few years, by the way, the Thrive Network, where I say, it's not only about surviving with diabetes, it's thriving with diabetes. Because you focus, when you are successful with diabetes, you are probably more often in the gym than somebody without diabetes. I was last year 177 times in the gym. I looked at the statistics. And you have probably, if you're successful, a healthier diet. And what I also implemented there is kind of a mindfulness and meditation to relax, because stress is never good, not for anybody, and with diabetes, obviously also not. And then I started with thriving with diabetes, and then I thought, okay, thriving with business. This is where I have bymichaelhofer.com, where I talk about artificial intelligence and mergers and acquisitions. And then I developed a third one where I said, okay, thriving in life, how do you achieve the things? How can you use visualization to be optimistic and focus on the results and don't get lost in the details and achieve the things in life you want to achieve?
Beautiful, beautiful. And I think so many people would love to be dealing with their stress. Would like to lower the cortisol drip if they could, but
Yeah.
they think that the right affirmation or the right breathing technique, or they get caught up in, as you talked about earlier. And it's not AI, it's AI as a tool. It's not the end, and neither is any of these processes. But how do you bring quantum physics into the element of manifestation? Because what you're sharing with us is how you go about manifesting peace within your metabolism and in your sense of who you are. And I think the people out there right now, with everything that's going on for them, share a little bit about
Yeah.
how you approach it and give us some little intellectual depth behind why you believe it works for you.
Yeah. First, let me start by saying that logic is a limitation, because we believe we can solve everything with logic, but it's actually, what is it, 10% of how we run, and the subconscious mind is actually what is running our lives.
Yeah. I say 5%.
Yeah, even less, right? So
Yeah.
5%. So we have to deal with the subconscious, and you need to be relaxed to deal with the subconscious, right? If you are sitting in a car in traffic or in the middle of a meeting and you say, I'm calm, that's not gonna help, right? So if you really want to reprogram and focus on your goals, because that's what I basically do, it's really a clear focus on the long-term and short-term goals. You need to be in a relaxed situation, and you get into a relaxed situation when you meditate, and you get the stress out of it. And even if it's just for a few minutes, that's where your subconscious suddenly opens up. And if you repeat it on a daily basis, right, it's not enough to do it only once, then you can reprogram yourself to be more optimistic and to never ever forget the goals where you actually want to land. Because then whatever happens on a daily routine, the small stuff, you just notice that it is small stuff, right? And you never forget where you actually want to land in the end.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. I could ask one question after another. I would like you, if you'd be so kind, as um, you've got a business owner that's at a point now where they're kind of running out a little bit of excitement for what they were once passionate about, and they don't know yet that that's only because of how they're looking at the business.
Yeah.
Not necessarily does it not offer that any longer. What would you suggest for people who are unsure of what they need to do? Do I need to hang on? Do I need to sell? Um, what do I need to do so that I can stay out of this limbo feeling and trying to just keep up?
Yeah.
And then can they get a hold of you?
Yeah. So the leading question for me in situations like this is also what if? And then you try to develop different routes. What if we continue growing? What if we grow significantly? What if I sold it right now? And then you develop many different approaches, and then you dig into the details what that really means. And then you align all of those different opportunities with the results where you want to end of this RPM. This is the most successful approach that I have seen, the what if question. And how you can reach me, the best is with my website, bymichaelhofer.com.
Outstanding. Well, you've got us all thinking, and I love the combination between all the years that you've invested in understanding finance and the intricacies of buying businesses and growing others, and then also blending that now with bringing the mind soul connection into that as well. So, because if those combinations are ignored, one's going to take away from the other. And when they're paid attention to, one just adds to the other.
Yeah.
And so it was a blessing having you and having the opportunity to spend some time with you. And all of those of you out there listening, I want to just thank you for both of us that you had a lot of choices. And the only thing that I think Michael would agree with me as well that we can't get back in life is our time. So we want to make sure that we maximize the opportunities that we have. And once again, that's why we're thanking you for taking your time to care enough about yourself so that you can be of value, even more value to others. So take care. All the best to all of you. Again, Michael, thank you again for your insights and your time with us.